Hello. Recently, a terrible tragedy has befuddled our society and corrupted the minds of impressionable youths. This plague, if you will, came from a certain book among a larger series. Normally, I would not care for something like this, but it seems to have gathered a lot of attention. The massive hype surrounding this book and now movie has called me to question its integrity. And so, today, I will be shedding some light on Twilight. Today I'll be going through various topics, starting with our first one. Traditional vampires versus Twilight vampires. Real vampires dwell in dark, stormy castles of Transylvania. Twilight vampires enjoy frolicking in the forests of Washington. Real vampires roam their castles waiting for innocent or lost travelers to wander inside. Twilight vampires live in mansions and go to high school and stare awkwardly at teenagers there for hours on end. Real vampires suck human blood for sustenance. Twilight vampires eat animals, which people do anyway, and then complain about it not being tasty. Real vampires will wait until you've fallen asleep before creeping towards you and feeding on your blood. Twilight vampires come inside your room through your window and stare at you while you sleep every night until you wake up. Real vampires will seduce you until you've let your guard down and then suck your blood. Twilight vampires will seduce you until they've fallen in love with you and then feel sorry for you. Real vampires will conduct experiments in underground laboratories, plotting schemes to bolster their forces and feed on every living soul. Twilight vampires take hikes in the mountains and play baseball in their spare time. Real vampires are undead monstrosities, creations of the devil, and creatures of the night. Twilight vampires feel the need to cry on their girlfriend's shoulders about how monstrous they are and how they'll never fit into society. Real vampires will burst into flames in the daylight sun. A Twilight vampire will sparkle and glitter and then complain about how he's different from everyone else. Now, for my second topic, wrong messages and other idiocies. There are a number of wrong messages to be found in this book/movie, if you have indeed read or seen either. For one, Bella and Edward get married early on. They're so fully enthralled in the throes of love that they seem to completely neglect everything else and everyone else and think only of themselves, and how much time they could be spending lying in the grass and staring at each other for hours on end. They also decide to have a baby. What kind of message do you think this brings to impressionable teenage girls everywhere? Is it okay to run away with some guy, completely give up on your life just for him, and then have a baby while shunning everything and everyone else away? Tell me, people, is it just me, or does this series make absolutely no sense? Now, before I throw up, I'd like to point out another completely useless thing about this book. It has been brought to my attention that some vampires possess unique abilities. One of the vampires can see into the future, and Edward himself can read other people's minds. The only reason I see for being able to read someone's mind is to further portray Edward as a pure thinker, pointing out other people's flaws, and further proving Edward's own ostentatious perfections. The way I saw the whole seeing into the future spiel was simply to get the plot out of a rut when no one knew what to do next. For example, where do we go now? What do we do? I know, I can see into the future. Let's do this. I should also mention that these vampires do not have fangs, and they cannot turn into bats. This is, according to Twilight, just a vampire myth. Alright, now for my third topic. Plot holes. Upon watching this movie, it occurred to me the vast amount of plot holes it has, and how it would take an idiot not to notice them. There's one scene where Bella is waiting at the parking lot of the school, after school, and she notices that Edward had been staring at her for about 5 minutes from across the parking lot. Suddenly, a car swerves into the parking lot, takes a turn too quickly, and is about to deck Bella, as it's skidding on its side. From out of nowhere, Edward, who was across the parking lot, runs over and stops the car before it could hit her, leaving a huge dent and proceeding to stare at Bella for a few minutes before he jumps off between the cars nonchalantly and runs off. What is peculiar is the fact that no one seemed to notice Edward running over to her, stopping the car, staring at her for a while, jumping off, or the huge dent in the car. Not even the driver. The final plot hole is the useless and tedious chase scene at the end of the movie. A vampire cooler than any of them put together is out to get Bella for no apparent reason, who is completely defenseless. Apart from, of course, the 7 or 8 vampires in Edward's family, who don't need to sleep and could constantly protect her until a cool vampire shows up. Apparently this is too much logic for their feeble minds, so they decide to split up and run off in separate directions, leaving Bella with only a couple of vampires, who eventually decides to wander off on her own and get her leg broken and arm bitten by the other vampire. A romantic evening usually starts off with a nice bottle of red wine, which ties into my 4th topic: how I feel Twilight fails as a romance novel. I'd like to begin with the fact that, despite the magazines and idiotic internet comments by raving fangirls, there's actually no chemistry between these two people. Bella, the new girl, naturally falls in love with the cutest guy in school. Edward's first instinct is to eat her because she smells nice, and eventually feels sorry for her and feels the need to protect her. He also likes to stare at her while she sleeps and every day at school. She even caught him one night, but all this doesn't matter because he's the hottest guy in school. So basically, we have your typical brain-dead schoolgirl and a dainty stalkerish guy. Actually, if you look at it, they're a perfect match. But another thing that you can probably throw in my face is this forbidden love BS that's been replayed hundreds of times. First of all, if it's forbidden love, then I'm Will Smith, sitting at home in Bel Air. Second of all, this isn't a Romeo and Juliet. He's a flippin' vampire. All he has to do is run off with her somewhere where no one can find them and eat her. If someone says no, he can eat him. That's it. There's nothing to it. It's not forbidden love if no one's trying to stop them. I recall one day cruising through an internet website called fmylife.com, where people can post anecdotes of what happened to them that day for either the amusement of others or for relief and help and guidance. One such story was the following. Today, my girlfriend dumped me, proclaiming she wanted someone more like her Edward. I asked her who Edward was. She held up a copy of her Twilight book. She was talking about a fictional vampire. F my life. You see, the standard for men has already gone up for the perverse and unrealistic fantasies of teenage girls. Anyone who would compare the reality of men, which isn't at all a bad thing, with a poorly written fictional character deserves to be single until she finds her Edward. This craziness, of course, she'll be looking for a long time. For a blood-sucking, glittering boyfriend who enjoys watching her sleep and constantly reminding her of how hard it is for him not to kill her. You see, in reality, the reason vampires were always portrayed as seductive and charming was not to fall in love with their food. It was so that they could lower their defenses and then bite the crap out of them later. You see, normally I wouldn't mind this entire ordeal at all. They can go on and be terrible excuses for literature on their own, for all I care. It's the hype that's really got me thinking, what is so good about this movie? This craziness has already spread to Facebook and other such sites. What could be the answer? You see, boys and girls, I think I found the answer to why this movie is so popular. Edward's character, the perfect man, is played by an actor who fits both the age requirements and physical appearance expectancies of raging teenage girls. The sole reason for girls flocking to theaters and drooling over this book is because they dream of one day having a boyfriend, like this fictional character